post so that we can have an archive so that this content that is brought to you by HITEC in partnership with our sponsors, we're able to then utilize for the growth later on of our whole entire community. After this session, we will send a survey with the link to the recording. Please feel free to share it with those who you think could use this type of information. It also lives on our YouTube page so that we can continue to share it with our partners and community for those who have not been able to attend. Think of it as an archive that you can access, content that has been created especially for you that you can come back to at any time. This is a really valuable resource for our partners and our members, and we are really happy that you're here in order to engage. There will be Q&A after the session. So please feel free to put your mics on mute, and then we'll come back to you to make sure that we answer all of your questions. And so I will not go on and on and on, and I'll give the floor over to our friends and colleagues over at EY. Exploring the metaverse is really, really something that's on everybody's mind right now, and how we can integrate this into our best business practices. To lead us in our discussions, we have two extremely enthusiastic and very knowledgeable presenters. First is Paul Sussex, who leads tech strategy and transformation at EY. His team incubates and experiments with new technology to drive tech business outcomes. Along with him, we have Almin Williams, who is the FSO of Cloud Innovation Leader under Paul and is responsible for leveraging cutting-edge technologies to drive innovation, enhance operational efficiency, and archive strategy business objectives. Paul and Almin, the floor is all yours. Thank you so much for participating and leading us and sharing your insights in this HITEC Live.
Well, thank you, Susanna. And it's an absolute pleasure to be here, and welcome to the HITEC community. It's great to be kicking off the, I guess, close to end of summer. I hate that summer's leaving us, but end of summer session. But it sounds like you've got a great agenda for future sessions, so we're glad to be part of it. So maybe first off, just wanted to say and acknowledge my colleague Aleem. He and I will be riffing a bit, going back and forth, talking about the metaverse. We'll open to all of your questions, and we hope we get a lot of them. So please feel free to, and don't be shy. So maybe we could start with a little bit about what we're going to be talking about today on going over the agenda. So maybe we can flip to the next slide. And while that's happening, oh, we've got a little disclaimer here. Okay, these views are our own, but here we are, Paul and Aleem. As Susanna graciously introduced us. So yeah, let's talk about the metaverse, right? So what do we want to talk about today? First, I want to maybe explain what the metaverse is, right? A lot of hype out there. It came in as a roar a couple of months ago, right? Now it's sort of sharing its sort of hype with AI. And at the end of the day, we'll get into what that really means. But welcome your conversations and questions along the way. But at the end of the day, why do we care, right? Why do we care? What are the key use cases that are being used and experimenting with in the metaverse, both in terms of how we work, how we play, and how we learn, right? Some great use cases that we'll show you and continue to iterate on. We'll deep dive in sort of how our team at EY uses the metaverse and the types of things that we're currently experimenting on. And I got on a personal note, it's been extraordinarily interesting to watch this technology evolve. Having kids of my own and being a video gamer back in my day, obviously I'm getting older now, so it's not the same level of technology as it was back then. But to see the immersion and the experience sort of coming together and start to blur the edges around what we do at home in terms of how we play on video games, and ultimately drive that experience into our workplaces to drive interesting use cases, and really help typically people that may not have had the experiences in a formal workplace, and using technology and platforms like the metaverse to bring people together that otherwise would never even see each other. So we think this is not just an opportunity to explore new technology, but a platform to bring people and ideas and innovation together. And Aleem is actually a great example of that because he was sort of one of the great minds behind a lot of what we're seeing today at EY. And a quick story about Aleem: he came over with an idea with a bunch of folks from the team saying, "Hey, I think we've got something here. Let's work with a few clients and let's start to explore opportunities that we can harness not just the technology, but some interesting use cases in underserved areas." So Lee, maybe I'll hand it to you for a little bit of next content.
Yeah. So if we can just jump to the slide, right? And my whole look at the metaverse and really how that came into being is really driven by the pandemic. We were at a stage where number one, we were meeting with clients every day. I was going into the office every day, interacting with team members. Then all of a sudden, the pandemic happened, and that whole model of how we work simply changed, meaning we went from going into the office every day to meeting virtually. Now, what the metaverse really brings to the table is the ability to create these immersive experiences. So I always like to say the metaverse is the immersive internet. Right now, we're on Teams and Zoom, and that has become the normal for interacting with individuals and organizations today. The metaverse is the next iteration of this. It's the 3D version of the internet that's going to usher in like a new revolution. So Paul, maybe as I pause there, maybe if you want to just quickly just talk about some of the things that you're seeing from a metaverse perspective and how it's kind of impacted our organization from the pandemic.
Yeah, sure. So from sort of post-pandemic, getting back to work, we've have at EY a bit of a hybrid environment, right? So we're not forcing people to come in, but we certainly encourage it, right, to get that human experience. But while folks are at home or wherever convenient, right, to do their work, which it's great to be able to have that flexibility. We want folks to be able to still take advantage of the interconnection that we as humans need to be successful. And so one of the things that we started on is around the notion of onboarding. So how do we get new employees quickly up to speed on not just the technologies that they need to use, but how we operate as a business, how we offer leadership opportunities and coaching through AI avatars, right? Which hopefully we'll show you in a little bit around, you know, connecting with, meta humans and digital humans as a service, as we'll also talk about. Well, these terms may be foreign for now, but Olim will get into it in a little bit. But using technology as a bit of uh, a bridge between the physical and the virtual, right? From Teams to actually being in the office, right? We felt that actually walking through a space, connecting with other folks, engaging in the space, having some fun along the way, right? And being able to, Susanna, you mentioned, archives of information for the community, right? Where we have, assistants now that you could ask essentially, hey, show me the latest on, banking trends in 2003. And the system will present that information, EY proprietary content, at the person's disposal. So instead of fishing around and looking for things on various different portals and intranet sites, you can now interact with digital humans and get what you need. And so that's just one example of how we're seeing this take hold in our organization. But we're just scratching the surface about what we can do. Back
So,
to you,
so
Elaine.
as a matter of fact, just to address the elephant in the room, right? So there's been a lot of conversation just around the metaverse in the press, and that one big tech giant named Facebook, who's now rebranded as Meta. And there's a lot of misconception with regards to the metaverse in general. It's often conceived that Meta actually owns the metaverse. So one of the myths that we'd like to dispel on this call is that number one, yes, Meta does play a very critical role in the metaverse. They provide the great headsets that we use today. The other myth that we really want to dispel is that we hear individuals say a lot of the times that you need a headset to access the metaverse. So, as a matter of fact, you can access the metaverse via your mobile phone, You can access the metaverse via your laptop, your iPad. And what it really means is the ability to bring all these experiences together. So when you want that more immersive feel, that 3D feel, like you're actually there within an environment, that's when you would really leverage the headset. As a matter of fact, a study was done and was released last week of July, which really looked at where a lot of organizations are within their metaverse strategy. And out of 6,000 organizations that were interviewed, it was found that about 60% of them are already investing in a metaverse strategy and already have initiatives on the ground to really leverage this new emerging technology. So if we could just move to the next slide.
So why do we care, right? So let's put our business hats on for a moment, right? So if you look at different social media platforms, it's really about attention. The more, the more focus that folks could have on their platform, right? The more captured attention they have, and the more business they'll be able to generate. As you could see, right, and I'm sure this is not unique, right? If you look, you look on subway cars, you look, walking around, even sometimes in traffic, you see people on their mobile devices all day long, right? I see my kids sometimes watching television while on their mobile devices and on their tablets and on their computers. So attention is key. And so while there are, I'm sure, social and other, sort of negative effects of this, which we won't cover today, but is a bit of a philosophical and interesting debate on how much attention we pay to our mobile devices. We from business perspective, social media and other online gaming, for example, are all fighting for attention. And the more enriching experience that one can provide will drive that behavior a certain way. And so we as the slide suggests, right, 63% increase in terms of daily spent on daily, sort of eyeball spent on social media, which is again a little bit of a, from 2012 to 2021. This stat has actually increased as we moved into 2023. So, while I do encourage folks to get out there and see the broader world and then take a walk in the park and enjoy life in the real world, there are exceptional opportunities to explore things that may not be available to many. And certainly from a business context, right, looking at specific use cases, which we'll talk about in a minute, to make life more efficient, more interactive, and more connected to information that otherwise were difficult to connect to.
Yeah, and Paul, I'm often reminded of, back in the day when the concept of the internet first came out, and you would approach an organization, you would say, "Hey, you need a website," right? And that was a very foreign concept for a lot of organizations. And you often wondered, well, why do you need a website, right? You need a place to show your offerings. You need a place to, promote your brand and things of that nature. And what we're seeing here, right, since the metaverse is that evolution of the internet, is we're seeing this very same emergence where organizations are now looking at the metaverse to learn, play, right, and even like communicate, just like they looked at the internet back then. So I always like to say, if an organization has your attention, they have your business. So hence the reason why the metaverse is so important. And you're going to see some of this within our demos as to how we try to integrate and almost create this universe from an EY perspective. We can go to the next slide.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, some use cases, and we may have mentioned it before, but Aleem and I worked almost exclusively in the financial services world. So banking, capital markets, wealth and asset management, or insurance. And so there's, obviously very specific use cases that come out of those industries. And there are many others and certainly other sectors as well. But just to give you a flavor of some of the, the incubation that we've done. And incidentally, we have we have an organization based out in Phoenix that Aleem looks after, that is sort of the core of our innovation team, that is spinning up these worlds and these use cases and building repositories of information that we can reuse to make these sort of experiences and curating these use cases much more efficient and faster. And what we also haven't mentioned, but we will now, with great power comes great responsibility, right? The power of creating these universes and these worlds is significant. And so, looking at things like ethical behaviors inside these worlds, rules and guidelines and security constraints, and control points that we have, also built out, which we'll talk about from a technical perspective. But it's nice to be able to show these interesting use cases, but without protecting them, without keeping them secure, without making them safe and available, right, for appropriate use is just as important. So just to give you a few flavors of things that we've built and have developed. So I mentioned the internal view from onboarding perspective, but for example, banking in the metaverse, right? Offering clients the ability to check balances, pay bills, transfer, and interact using various different artificial reality or virtual reality channels. So imagine, you all, I'm sure, have seen in-game purchasing, where you could immediately buy a new avatar or a new item to help you on your quest in your game. Similarly, you may want to, while you're in the metaverse shopping for something or looking something up or exploring the Andes, right? You may want to order a pizza, and to be able to do that all from a touch or a feel or a connection point, all integrated in the back end and secure and tracked accordingly is interesting. So from a payments and banking perspective, that's available. From an insurance example, in closing in the metaverse, right? So if any of you bought a car or a house, or closed on an apartment, all of the paperwork and the endless reams of trees that need to be involved to actually get through some of these activities is significant, right? So being able to, similar to have that experience in one place, having all the documents digitized, from digital signatures through, validation of those informations and archiving and sending those through workflows to the appropriate parties to open up, for example, getting your plates from, it's part of a motor vehicle, or you buy a car automatically, and all the things that are largely done manually today, having that done not just from on a different platform, but doing it in a much more streamlined fashion. And then from a business perspective, looking back at efficiencies and continual improvements by which you can continue to tweak the process and make it even more more efficient. And for those in underserved communities, for example, handicapped people or folks that can't physically move out of their homes, this is another interesting dynamic where you're bringing this service to them, right? As opposed to them going to a lawyer's office, for example, and having to figure out ways to get there and back. And so having all of this together in one particular area is really interesting. But maybe, Liam, I'll save a few for you to talk through.
Yeah, I think one of the most interesting use cases that a lot of organizations really navigate towards is more of rethinking onboarding. And what I mean by onboarding, either, your interview process for your first day of work, right? What does that pre-interaction from an organization perspective look like? And then number two, what does your day one look like? We're now in an era where it is hybrid work mode. And for a lot of organizations, that process, when you look at it from 1 to 10, rate your onboarding experience, right? A lot of organizations get the same feedback where it's not as great as the in-person experience. So a lot of organizations really look at that use cases as a very low-hanging fruit as to where they start with the metaverse. As a matter of fact, we EY, right? That's where we also started as well. So maybe Paul, as we kind of jump into the next slide, maybe we can kind of just queue up that demo, and maybe you can talk about our intern program.
Yeah. In fact, that community event use case that we have under WAM might also apply. So we had, as many organizations do, right? We're always excited about having the interns coming. The interns are coming. Everybody's excited about these new minds, these new faces, just ready to graduate and getting some real live work experience. But we also recognize that the experience that we want to drive and curate is so important, right? That has an impact on our brand as a company. It has an impact as a potential employer, right? If we want, high talent, high capable talent to join our firm, we want to make sure that their experience with us is top notch and differentiated. but also if there's accommodations that people need. For example, folks that have, different sensitivities to different textures or lighting or what have you. We want to be able to accommodate for those as well. And so, this allows us through an onboarding a set of processes to provide a very curated, a very specific experience for those individuals as they come on and get not just their laptops and their hardware and their badges and whatnot, taking their pictures and things like that, but also a community that they can connect to that are very like-minded of their age group, for example, or maybe an alma mater. They're from same schools that they can now identify, connect with, and interact with. And we try to make it fun along the way, right? Different Easter eggs that can be found, different quests that people can go on, all with the intent to enriching an experience, connecting with other humans, right? For that differentiated perspective, but really starting to, hone in on the things that, they ultimately want to learn, right? If they're a data person, for example, or a business person, connecting them with practitioners that they could learn about, what they're doing in school, to actually see a practitioner with a real situation and a real client actually do that work, and then give an opportunity for them to perform it, sometimes virtually, right? With the careful inspection of someone that's done it for many years to provide coaching along the way. So those are some examples by which we took the interns through, and by all accounts, they were very impressed and pleased, and I'm very happy to report that we hired all of them. So we're enriching not just our our headcount at UI, but we we now have putting them on some of these projects that you see before you right now.
Yeah.
So Liam, I think we have the demos queued up next.
Yeah. So if we can just go to the next slide, we really want to give you all a view of what that looks like, right? So moving forward, you're going to see a whole list of like demos here on the screen. So if we can if we can just play the video, Christian. There we go. So what you're seeing here is how we've reimagined the intern onboarding process. We've created a virtual room based off one of our offices. And here, what they do is they get a link, and this is what you have here is a lounge concept where they can actually go in, view video content from like a journey perspective, even have the ability to meet with some of their team members live in here. As you can see in the illustration there, getting an overview of some of the org charts, learning about a history with regards to EY, but creating a safe space from an onboarding perspective where a lot of them are in different parts of the United States, giving them the ability to meet, not in person, but giving them the ability to meet in an immersive environment where they can really start collaborating. So here, this room, what you're seeing, it emulates the office space, and that's what we really went after doing. A lot of the times, this is done via Zoom and Teams, and we've gotten feedback that while you can collaborate, there is always that missing sense of immersion. So we've been able to use the metaverse to bring everyone together to really enhance the onboarding process. Now, while folks might say, "Hey, this is this going to replace our onboarding process?" As a matter of fact, we've actually been looking at just giving individuals options. This is really an enhancement to that process, right? So oftentimes when I hear, individuals talk about the metaverse and its capabilities, a lot of the times and a lot of the use cases that we see, it's not a full replacement of physical things, but rather enhancing these processes. Paul, anything you might want to add before we jump to the next demo?
No, Liam, I think you did a great job. But maybe I will say though that having the feedback directly from the interns, it was a great reward. Aleem was a little shy, but kudos to his team and a credit to the team he's built, because this was all done. Everything that you see before you was done by Aleem and his team, which is really impressive. But started with just an idea. So being able to watch and empower individuals to not just have an idea, but to take that through, a genuine business process and get the funding and actually see it here before you and be able to present to this group is such an honor. And I just wanted to say thanks to Liam and maybe embarrass him a little bit by all the great work that he's done. So wanted to take that opportunity.
Great. So while we were working on the intern portion of things, this actually led us to a new use case, specifically for developing our current population. So if we would just want to jump to the next demo. And this demo is around going bigger than just the office, right? Is really how can we start building a campus? So we have over 200,000 employees spread across the globe. How can we then leverage the metaverse back to our concept as to why it matters, right? How do we use the metaverse as the glue? How can we create a concept that allows individuals to go learn, play, and work all within the same space? So what you're seeing here is Ether Campus. This is the campus that we built where at any given point in the day, team members can access it. If they want to learn about specific components from an EY perspective, uh, that content is made available. There's also games and interaction that you could also interact with it from that perspective. But the really amazing part, and I see this as a true value from a metaverse perspective, is the ability to break down language barriers. So a while back, we did our very first concert in the metaverse where we hosted over 5,000 people in the metaverse from different parts of the globe. And one of the things that we were looking at is how can we use the metaverse to actually do live translations for individuals that speak different language. So we had folks from Chile talking to folks in New York, and the ability as an avatar from a metaverse perspective, which is your digital identity within the space, being able to talk and live translate really elevated that experience.
And Aline, it looks like Miguel's got a great question in the chat here. So the question's right. The intern experience onboarding looks awesome. Thanks, Miguel. And how many interns have gone through this new experience, and what was the major feedback, both positive and constructive, I assume? So yeah, so we had about, I mean, counting our interns, we've had about close to 100 now go through, but we've also spent, I mean, we've had learning events now that weren't interns, but over 20,000 employees simultaneously were in different campus rooms that we've had turns. It was about 100. Now the feedback, so positive feedback, very different, very differentiated. Didn't expect it. Want to do it again. Some of them wanted to keep the goggles, right? Because we did provide goggles. Because it's one thing to see it in 2D, and you obviously can't interact with it on your computer over Teams like we are now. And we're looping the video, obviously, for bandwidth constraints and just brevity. But there is a whole different dimension when you put the goggles on, and this technology obviously is improving, and to be able to walk around and interact and communicate and emote and sit down and throw a ball and throw a frisbee and things like that, it's interesting. So it's like walking in a video game. But in terms of constructive opportunities for us. So one, and Liam actually hinted on one, language barriers, right? So, we are a global organization, and we've opened this up to multiple, countries. So, while many have used English as sort of a common, language to communicate, obviously that's not the case all over the world, and that shouldn't be. And so one of the things that we've introduced is, as Lee mentioned, is the ability to converse in natural language and having the system translate either via text or through. We're working on some avatars that could actually live translate in different languages, similar to what you may have seen on some of the sci-fi movies, which is really interesting. So we're still prototyping. I wouldn't say we've completely figured it out yet, but we've got some interesting opportunities there. That was one. The other constructive opportunity was around, and Lee mentioned, the ability to access this 24/7. So they wanted to be able to have personal space within these campuses, similar to like a locker that you would have at work that you could use for the space. So as you store things, as you read new articles or collect, for example, like LinkedIn, collecting, information about people, you want to be able to store it somewhere so you could refer to it again. And so we're working on this concept of individual lockers that people could take what they have and what they've learned and store it logically and in a easy to find way, and then using avatars and AI to present it in a way where they could reference and index it, and queue it up for other use cases. So that was another interesting use case that we're also working on now. But like as I mentioned, very positive. I know it's looping quite a bit, so it's probably getting redundant. But those are some of the questions. Hope that answered your questions. Oh, having legs is a differentiator. Yeah, great point, Melanie. That was actually one of the feedback points when we first started this. In some of the original platforms that we've used that were commercially available, no legs, right? So it was a little weird. EY Ether is what we had built out, to basically give us the functionality that we needed, but also the security that we needed as well. We wanted to, and we wanted to make sure this was within our private cloud, heavily secure, connecting, not to get too technical, but connecting people's, IDs and credentials that they would use to log into their laptops, into the metaverse as well. So it's one seamless, same directory, same security protocols, and the like. But yeah, legs were a big deal for a lot of people. Great point. So Lee, maybe pass it back over to you for our next demo.
And I think, Paul, I think that's a great transition as we talk about identity within the metaverse, right? And here within this demo is something that we're looking at from like a futuristic perspective. Now, we've spoken a lot about the metaverse, and I'm pretty sure one of the questions we're going to get is you have the metaverse and you have Web3, right? How do they all fit together? And I always simply say, the metaverse is very much like a web application where you have the metaverse being your front end, your website that you will access, and you have Web3, which will handle all of your transactions. So as Paul mentioned, right, how can you take assets and things of that nature and actually tie it to an identity, and you can actually bring it seamlessly along? What this demo shows here on is what the future might look like from identity perspective. So one of the things that we always got from a security perspective, how can we validate who's behind that avatar, right? So I know we're talking about legs, but let's go one step deeper, right? I can show up as an avatar as the Green Hulk, and it could say Liam, but you don't know for sure who's behind that avatar. So really looking futuristic, what identity mechanisms can we really build and leverage to really identify individuals in the metaverse? So this scenario just looks at, some of these digital assets as they come on board. So if you're buying a house, you can have that 3D model, that house or that car, right? And if you're looking to do a transaction in the metaverse, what does that really look like? So two users join a space, and there is this level of authentication, and that's using blockchain technology to really authenticate the avatar and the assets that's available. And we can do a quick validation to say that John Williams is John Williams, and there's the real person's photo behind it. So also wanted to give you a sense of looking at it holistically, internally, but also securely as well.
It's a great point, Liam. And when you think about the practical applications of some of these use cases, security, the integrity of that information is really important because, as you might imagine, there's a lot of, threat vectors and some bad actors, to put it mildly, right? That could do some damage if not used, appropriately. So a lot of effort and a lot of thinking that it's sometimes goes unrecognized and unappreciated because it's behind the scenes, right? When security is working, no one cares, right? Because everything's working. But it's when it doesn't work, that's when you get a lot of bad press and lawyers and all sorts of things, plus the actual harm that comes to the individual. So we take the security element extraordinarily serious, and we've learned so much working with other experts across our firm and in different industries and clients to learn more about how to employ other technologies. Right? Lee mentioned blockchain, cryptographic proofs, and zero knowledge proofs, and similar things that are using on the crypto market to validate transactions and keep live trails for those. And then as you think about as these are more financial services use cases, the regulators, right, the SEC, right, the OCC, all have interest in terms of monitoring, regulating, and and establishing controls that they could audit, right? So ultimately, as we move into the future with this new tech, we've got to go not just boldly, but we've got to go safely, and that's sort of a key message. So for every, foot we take, in terms of innovation, we've got to take another foot in terms of security and making sure that it's safe for use. And of course, we'll hear about things that happen along the way, and we'll certainly learn from them. But one of the things that we're very careful about is before we go live, so to speak, we've got a very regimented testing program to make sure that this stuff actually works and performs as expected. So a lot of interesting things that happens behind the curtain, if you will. How about the next one?
Yeah. So while talking to clients, and someone mentioned, I'm just looking at the comments here, just like around legs in general, right? Yes. I always wish that we can have legs within the metaverse. Now, we've been looking at several solutions as, how do we build the right and proper features? How do we experiment? How do we do this in a secure environment? What role does the cloud play within this ecosystem? And what we've really developed internally is our own metaverse platform, and that's hosted on the cloud. It's completely cloud agnostic. And here are some of the features that we've been able to leverage in those onboarding experiences that you've seen, right? So not only does the users, they connect via a web link where they can join, but they also have all the capabilities that you have via Zoom and Teams. So there's a audio capability, there's a video capability to see the person behind the avatar. There's that level of authentication that we've worked internally to really build out. And what we're seeing now is this great convergence of the metaverse really meeting artificial intelligence. So we've developed some really great modules along this platform to really make that come to life. Paul, anything you want to add, or should we move to the next one?
Oh yeah, let's keep moving. I'm just looking at the time, but yeah, I mean, I'm sure the wheels are all spinning, and I hope that they are, right? There's a tremendous amount of information that can be stored, right? As we all know, but accessing that information in an easy, functional, and fun way has been the challenge. So, some interesting stats, as we sort of bridge and segue into this next concept around digital humans as a service. Psychologically, right? Physiologically, we're humans, right? The history of our lifespans and history of our evolutions, right? We've always interacted and worked together in groups and teams, and that's how we've survived. And so the ability to interact with human-like identities, right, is really important. And there's been some interesting studies. Alima, you could maybe talk to a few of them about how the adoption rate and interaction rate changes when you use different avatars and the ability to actually use this notion of a digital human that has a lot of the same attributes that we have in the physical universe. So, Aline?
Yep. And if we can just go into the slide here. So a couple months ago, we've all seen ChatGPT come onto the scene and really, change and shake up on how we, just look at artificial intelligence and how to integrate it into our everyday lives. Now, we decided to take, from a starting point perspective, right, take a very different approach here. And that is really, how do we build out those large language models, which is your generative AI capabilities, but how do we really create the next iteration of the chatbot? So today, as you go on a website looking for customer service support, you have that chatbot, right? Some people love it. Some people will prefer to talk to a person live on the phone. And what we're seeing increasingly is that this new iteration of the chatbot, which really says that an individual is more inclined to talk to an artificial intelligence entity if it has a face, a personality, and a character behind it. So a lot of organizations now are looking at what is the next iteration of this. So as Paul mentioned, some of the great benefits, right? It's really taking that ChatGPT responses that you're getting from a generative AI perspective and really bringing that in a more human form. So we've gone down some crazy aspects of how far we can go with this, right? And we have a really great example. And Christian, I just want to make sure when we jump to the demo that maybe if you could just reshare with the sound, just to make sure that that setting is checked so folks can hear it. So we'll see the demo. But there's some really great stats if you look at just digital humans, right? The ability now to really hook them into processes, the ability to have them live on your website, the ability to have them in live kiosks. And we're going to give you a view showing our digital human AI Rocky on how we've been able to work with our supply chain team and actually build out this digital human to answer everyday questions that they get. So if we flip to the next one. So this is AI Rocky. Before you play the video, Christian, maybe just reshare with the sound so our folks can hear it on the call. And I'm just gonna give you an update, right? So what went into making Digital Rocky? So Digital Rocky is actually based off of a real EY employee who works in supply chain. We've been able to work with Rocky actually do a 3D head scan. So we were able to bring in all of his facial features. He did crack this really interesting joke. Can you give me a little bit more muscles in the metaverse? Because this is possible. And we were able to really create an actual digital replication of Rocky. Not only that, you do have the ability to even make it more realistic, doing things like voice cloning, and really train this digital human to really emulate some of the day-to-day questions that Rocky gets from an EY supply chain perspective. So Christian, I don't know if the screen share came back, but can you just reshare with sound?
So
Yeah,
Christian's pulling that up. Okay, you got it? Oh, good.
I don't have the latest driver, so I'm having Mackenzie pull it up right now. I don't know if she's there.
Always good to have a backup plan. Thanks, Mackenzie.
No
Yep.
problem.
And as she's pulling that up, right, think about your jobs and some of the redundant things that we all have to do, answer the same questions over and over again. So thinking about, where this could potentially go, using, your digital human that you own, that you maintain, that you could actually bring to work to help, alleviate some of the redundant tasks that you have. So again, thinking down the future and a lot of hops that we've got to get to think about where this potentially could have a home. But there's a lot of interesting use cases that people are experimenting now that, that your version of yourself could do a lot of the work for you and make your day more productive. So back to you, Lee.
Yep. And this is a great opportunity to really showcase the power of artificial intelligence, right? So when you have the metaverse, which has its 3D capabilities, and we spoke about digital humans bringing a face, we were able to create this digital character. So if you just want to play the video, this is one of our employees interacting with Rocky, and I hope you can hear the sound over Teams. Who are you?
Can you hear it?
Yes.
Hello, my name is Rocky, an AI supply chain assistant here at EY.
Can you tell me more about supply chain at EY?
Sure. EY has a strong focus on supply chain and is always looking for ways to improve and streamline the process. We have a global team of over 600 professionals with representation in over 35 countries. We are committed to maintaining a diverse supplier base and building relationships with suppliers that reflect the market, clients, and communities we serve.
Who's EY's biggest client? Supply chain.
This is a difficult question to answer as it would depend on the specific products and services being supplied.
Thank you.
Right. So as you can see there, right, one of the things that we've been really able to do is to train a digital Rocky with not to disclose personal information, just like around like EY, right? And really give it these really great guardrails where Digital Rocky is able to answer a lot of the questions that comes through day to day, but at least know when not to expose some of that information. Now, one of the things that we hear from artificial intelligence community is just the concept of hallucination. And that is an artificial intelligence entity making things up, right? So we've been able to really learn and really create this really great knowledge base, and along with rules, and we're not going to go through it on this call, right? But just around like AI ethics, to really build something that an individual can interact with and actually find real-time answers to their questions.
Hey, Leo, I think there was a hand up for a second. I'm not sure if we missed your question, but it looks like there's an interest to go back to slide 14. I think that's back one. Sharing some high-level details, doing some, okay. Craig, if you're on, by all means, ask your question.
Yeah, sure
I
thing.
believe that
No, I
might have been-
appreciate, I was actually on mute. My apologies. Thank you for going back. No, I was actually curious because, you know, as we look at different, obviously AI technologies, but in this case, you're looking at, you know, more augmenting the experience here with the digital human, which I think is amazing work too, was the combination of things like Gen AI that obviously allows you to leverage large language models, you know, transpose that in human-like form, and once those models are internally trained, then externalize that with and this being a potential interface to then take it to much more of an external level, will it be within a metaverse as a digital twin, digital human, or internally, right, to replace traditional, you know, web-oriented chat bot type capabilities that may be human managed but now become AI enabled, if you know what I mean. So I was just curious on some of the digital human aspects that you looked at from the AI product. So no immediate question, just really impressive stuff.
Got it.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Craig. Yeah, Lee.
Yeah, no, it's been really great, right? Because it's really to showing how you can really pair these emerging technologies together and really build out those experiences. And we've actually looked at the chat interface, right? And the chat interface that ChatGPT uses, right? There's also now a lot of research as to, now that AI is moving so fast and now chat has become so big, right? What are these new experiences? And we really looked at the metaverse as a really, really great way to really do this, right? And now, as we're talking about digital humans here, also this concept of a subject matter expert really, really popped up, right? We were able to train these digital humans on actual like legislation. So being able to have a team member or even just like internal policies from an EY perspective, being able to feed our subject matter expert documentation that we have on those policies, and then being able to have a person just go up and ask a question in the metaverse actually really, really changes and enhances that experience.
Yeah. And just to maybe to add, similarly, right, the complexity of knowing your HR policies and benefits and things as an employee level, to be able to say, hey, are we covered for a certain procedure, or and to do that confidentially, right? For example, is important, as you would to an HR professional, for example, internally. But at the same time, some of the use cases also require, logging and monitoring, right? So there is appropriate behavior that happens. So, there's other infrastructure that needs to be supported. For example, does the organization have an AI policy, right? What's the use policy of that? Does the organization have an ability to retain logs of these chats, if they so require them from a regulatory perspective? And so there's a lot of interesting ripples that flow from these types of advancements, and we're just, again, scratching the surface. But we're also looking to get much more involved in some of the legal and regulatory areas to help influence legislation and regulatory bodies that ultimately will be very interesting in putting some controls in some of this areas. Again, great power, great responsibility, but I think it's an opportunity for all of us to not just experiment with it, but really, challenge safety and equity on some of the use cases that that are out there, and to be able to provide the right level of control for everyone to use it appropriately and safely. So I'll lean back to you. I think we've got one or two more slides.
Yeah, I think we're up on questions. I'm just looking at the time, so I think we can jump into Q&A.
Oh, sure.
And go ahead to feel free to unmute yourself if you have a question. You can go ahead and ask. You can raise your hand, turn on your camera.
Yeah, hi, I'm Valdano. Actually, I have a question, please. It's just like a real quick one. I would like to know, does the metaverse include a private AI into its configuration?
Yeah, well, Donna, I can take your question. So when you look at artificial intelligence, and I'm just gonna bring it to the Gen AI concept right now. There's two routes that an organization would go, right? We call private LLM, private large language model, which are a lot of the times are the open source models, very similar to what Meta released the other day, which is the Llama model that you can then take and actually bring into your own data center, actually host. And then you also have kind of like the third party, which is OpenAI, that does provide things like GPT-4 through a large language model. Simply put, it's the ability to access these large language models via an API. Now, the metaverse and how we're building out this AI model has both a private, meaning leveraging OpenAI, and both a public perspective as well. So what we've done is we've created an orchestration layer depending on the interest or the use case, where you can go extremely private for security purposes and public for speed, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you so
Yeah.
much, Ali.
And maybe Aleem, just to before Mega, we'll get to you right away. The just maybe just to add additional color to response. A great question, incidentally. The a lot of our clients and companies out there are recognizing that their data, their proprietary information, their private information it needs to be protected, obviously, but it could also be monetized, right? So their knowledge using an overlay of an AI engine, an LLM model, could provide, revenue streams for the company. So there'll be some interesting, I think, use cases by which companies will start to now monetize their information and expose it only under subscription basis or what have you, similar to what some of the GPS software that we use to get around our cars now, and subscriptions and things like that. So very interesting. Again, data, monetization, safety, all of these components are all coming, sort of, live and furiously as we talk about new technologies around metaverse and more broadly AI. But good question. Miguel, sorry, back to you.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you, Alim. This is awesome. Great application of the metaverse and also the AI. Just thinking about a little bit about the experience, the user experience, right? How do you go about evaluating how well the experience is going with the end users? How do you capture feedback, and how do you capture how accurate the responses from Rocky, for example, are for the user? Is there any approach that you're taking?
Yeah. So the way we treat the metaverse and the way we treat artificial intelligence is we don't treat it as these like futuristic technologies that require new processes, right? From a governance standpoint, from a QA testing standpoint. As a matter of fact, when we first started doing this, just like any other application, we started it internally. So having our teams that actually use it to actually do our internal daily stand-ups, right? Share screen, those functionalities. So there was great feedback internally from our team. Now, since it is an application that you can actually host within your data center, what we're able to do is to really follow all the different QA, different patterns that your organization has to really make sure from a performance perspective, right, that we're matching that up. Also, just A/B user testing out there, right? So leveraging individuals that have never used the metaverse before, try it, right? And then compare it to experiences that they use today and really saying, has this elevated the experience or made it worse, right? And being able to have a product team where you can pump back all that insight to create new features and enhancements. So we really treat the metaverse and AI as products that live within our data center that follows that exact same application lifecycle that an Instagram or a Meta will follow. I hope that answers the question.
And we
Yes,
have a
it does,
question in the
definitely.
chat. Sorry about that, Miguel. We have a question in the chat with Sarah. I just want to make sure we get this in before we finish. So Sarah says, what type of roles and or skill sets do you see in highest demand in the coming years and decades in support of further development of the metaverse beyond AI/development?
Paul, you want to go first, or you want me to go?
Yeah, sure. So I think maybe it's a few buckets of roles, right? For one, there's the obviously, computer science, programming, and obviously AI will have a heavily augmented, support for programming in general. But creatives, right? Creative designers, user journeys and stories, graphic designers, um, you know, incredible artistry, as you could tell. These worlds all require not just colors and pictures; they require textures and lighting and different aspects. And then I think there'll also be roles around legal. So attorneys will certainly have their day, right? And HR professionals around appropriate use. There'll be linguistics and languages and psychologists that will study human behavior and interactions in these types of platforms. So that's just a few, but I mean, outside the core technology areas, obviously HITEC being a great forum for technologists, but there'll be so many other and frankly new roles that we could explore, right? That not to mention new entrepreneurial ideas that will spawn from connecting different pieces together to drive new business opportunities and the like. So those are just a few. But Aleem, I'm sure you have others.
Yeah, I'd probably say the hottest role on the market right now, which is that job title of prompt engineering, right?
Great point.
So
Great point.
believe it
Yeah.
or not, being able to write, as computers kind of came on board, right, and computers started doing a lot of things, right? We often looked at, people who went to school for writing and actually structuring things, right? They often wondered, well, what does my role, especially from a liberal arts major, what does that play in this greater ecosystem? As a matter of fact, if you're able to craft a clear, concise message, you're a prompt engineer, right? And that's a role that is becoming increasingly important in this space. So as you can see, the ability to create these prompts from an artificial intelligence perspective give you really great results in the end. Now, as Paul was mentioning, right, the 3D artist bits and pieces, those creative roles play a very crucial role in developing aspects of the metaverse. And what we've been seeing more increasingly is actually AI having an impact there as well, right? So you're having a lot of efficiencies from a creative perspective. I'm sure everyone has heard of either Mid-Journey, meaning you create artwork with Gen AI, right? So there's new different prompt to creative skill sets that's really popping up that you could really leverage within this space.
Great, Aleem. I think we got one more question for Miguel, and I think we're out of time. About A/B testing, are we using specific quantitative metrics for LLMs?
Yeah, I think Miguel, that question requires a whole
That's what I thought.
different session on the kind of how do you train your LLM.
Yeah.
But yes, there's several methods to really train your LLM. And I think if you're starting it small, on a very small initiative, right? Really working with the subject matter experts that really know the data and know the content. And that's what we did with the supply chain team. Really worked with those subject matter experts and doing simple things like, would you answer this question this way, right? I just want to give you an example. But that is a very pointed answer with regards to starting small, but going big as to how you really reinforce the learning from an LLM perspective is a whole different topic. But I just wanted to share and provide some of that insight.
Thanks, Lee. Well, on behalf of Aleem and I, thank you all for the opportunity, and I hope this was engaging. By all means, reach out to us if you have any questions. But back to our HITEC sponsors.
Thank you so much for that engagement. We super appreciate it and all of the information that you've shared. Mil gracias a todos for attending, and we look forward to seeing you at our next event.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Gracias.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.